Welcome everyone to this second of three series on the COVIDSafe Legal Compliance Plan and Activities. My name is Nihal, Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. This session is the second of a three-part series that we are running, and it is specifically focused on what activities that you should be doing as part of your COVID-safe plan itself. Last week, we covered off topic one, which is around the COVID-safe plan itself and how it is actually structured. We will be going back and just covering that off so that we overlap a little bit. But today's session is really on the key activities, the forms that come out of your COVID-safe plan, and to also show you what other agencies have done that is actually working right now and has been working really since the start of this pandemic. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So as I mentioned, this is a 3-week session. We have run previous webinars on COVID-safe plans themselves, and after those sessions were run, these are all published and freely available on the YouTube Jumbo 360 YouTube channel as well too, and all materials circulated around, and you can access those off the knowledge base as well. Now, with it, this series of webinars was a request by many agencies looking at, well, what do we do around managing our COVID-safe plan? What does one look like? How do we use it? What are other agencies doing that is actually working right now? All of these questions is things that have actually come up. So we're running this 3-part series. This second webinar is really focused around the forms and activities that agencies have been using. We can actually show you what they actually look like, and importantly, what is actually working. There's a lot of information that's out there. Many agencies are confused about, well, what should we be saying to staff? What forms should we be using? Okay, we might have a COVID-safe plan in place, but what does that actually look like? So we covered off the COVID-safe plan and what it actually looks like last week. And again, for those of you that are just joining us today, we will be sending that particular link in all the materials that we send out today. But we will be just repeating that, as I mentioned, just a little bit to get a bit of an overlap and to put it into context around the forms and other requirements and activities that you really should be looking at. And then next week, what we are going to look at is the reporting, the monitoring, and the surveillance of it for your agency, and how this can be done quite simply and without creating all this additional work for you. At the end of the day, this is about creating a safe work environment for staff and also for the clients you deliver services to. So whether you're a community health service, whether you provide religious services, whether you work out of a cafe, which some not-for-profit agencies do. Again, really these webinars are structured to give you that insight into what you actually need to do and what activities you should be looking at as part of this. So as I mentioned previously, by attending this legal webinar, you will get a timely collection of resources. We have been updating these resources as the law has been changing. We've certainly seen that in the last few weeks as well too, and even few days, where yesterday we ran a webinar around AGMs and how to run your AGM during a COVID-safe, during a pandemic, during COVID-19, and what does that actually look like as well too, and what directions the Treasurer has already provided, the Commonwealth Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, has provided, and what does that look like? So again, you'll be getting these legal updates across for your agency and resources for you to use. What as part of this is we're going to be looking at seeing what COVIDSafe system and activities other companies and not-for-profits have been doing that is working. So let's be quite clear here. This is not a webinar where we're just going to sort of give you theory around this. What we are giving you specifically is the updates around what is actually working for agencies as well as a couple of case examples that you need to look at and what you can actually do as well. So as part of that, let's jump in and have a look at some of the areas that we are going to cover off today. With it, just a couple of housekeeping items. Sorry, before we just jump straight in. If you do have any questions, by all means, use the chat function on this webinar. I can see a number of staff have already been doing that, and we are following that through. This webinar is being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session, where we will turn off the recording and you can actually ask any questions online or even post those in the chat group, and we will stay online and make sure that all questions are answered. This webinar will then be published on our Agenda 360 YouTube channel, and all materials used during the session, including login information to dashboards, will also be provided back to you as a resource to use as well too. Knowledge-based circulars are also sent out as part of our weekly circulars to all registered attendees. So as part of that, if you do have any questions, we will obviously take out people's names, but all questions that are raised will also be circulated back out to create really a knowledge base for you to go back and look at as well. So let's jump straight in as part of this and look at one of the case examples of an agency that has what they've done and what has actually been working for them as part of this process as well. And some of the questions that we do get asked is, well, what have other not-for-profit agencies actually been doing that is actually working? And one of the things that we have seen is with a company called Rumbalara Aboriginal Corporation. Now, this agency, what they have actually done is effectively run, and let me bring this up for you as well too. Here it is here, and I just thank Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer, who has agreed to share some of this information on. So what they've actually done is this, and I've just highlighted the plan in a bright color because that's what we covered off from session last week. What we're looking at is really all of the pandemic forms, the policies. We'll look at the monitoring next week around the risk registers and also the HR registers, but I'll show you what that actually looks like. And as part of that, the pandemic forms that their staff have been using to ensure that they remain COVID safe, or that they're monitoring what is actually going on. And this was actually even done before the Commonwealth's talk about their mobile app as well. So it is around even self-assessment forms as well as training registers as well for staff, which is required by the Commonwealth directives around having your COVID-safe activities. So what we're seeing is something that is actually being worked on. It is something that they've loaded in some 9,000 forms and items since the start of this pandemic, to give you an idea of the volume around this. And with it, it's something that is literally used daily to monitor and to ensure that their agency does all it can to remain COVID safe as part of this process. So effectively what we've got is your COVIDSafe Plan, which is something we covered off last week around this, and I'll just give you an overlap for those people that are joining us today that are new around it, but it's also good to see where the COVIDSafe Plan comes from and what it includes and how it's structured. But effectively, the part of the COVIDSafe Plan is a plan is great, and it's a key part of what the Commonwealth and the Prime Minister and individual state governments have required agencies to actually have to ensure that you are and you remain COVID safe. But one of the things that are coming out of this is what are the forms and the activities that you should be doing to actually put that plan into practice and to make sure that you're meeting what I'll say is your work health and safety obligations to make sure that you're effectively managing your COVID safe activities. And so what we've looked at and what we've seen, and this is an example of not just Rumballara as a case study, but other agencies, they've had a look at their what we call the COVID-19 daily assessment form. Some agencies have done this as part of the moving into a weekly assessment form, and I'll come to that to show you what that looks like. If staff are working from home, and there has been a lot of talk by different state governments to say, well, you should be having staff work from home where possible. Now, if that's the case, what does that look like? What forms should we be using? Are there work health and safety obligations that we need to make sure that staff are following? Should we have things like a workstation register or a cleaning register as well too? So these are the types of things that you need to consider rather than just having the plan itself as part of that. And obviously there are safe work checklists that you can obviously use and are published as well, but where do they actually fit in to your plan? So this is the sorts of things that we're looking at, and the next week we're going into some of the reporting structures to make sure that you're effectively meeting and following your monitoring surveillance as well too. So as part of this, let's just have a look at some of the overview, which we've covered off. I'm just going to move through these slides fairly quickly. As we've said in the past, there are some legal compliance obligations from the Prime Minister's three-step COVIDSafe Plan, which was announced some time ago, and this is the document that is being used and referred to in other states and territories around Australia. So we would have seen a number of other equally state premiers holding this up and equally showing, look, in each section, step 1, step 2, step 3, and I've just highlighted where it says that workplaces, being yourselves and agencies yourselves, as part of this, so that way the workplaces are to develop a COVID-safe plan. And so that's part of the requirements that are required. And you can see at the top, it talks about states and territories can implement the changes based on their own COVID-19 conditions. And we've seen over the past few weeks that there's just a lot of information that's actually out there. Everything from new legislation to mobile apps and documents. So where do you effectively begin? Now, over the past week, couple of weeks and focused last week, we looked at the COVIDSafe Plan. We looked at the legislation and went through that. We looked at, obviously, even down to some of the checklists and tools that are coming out of the Commonwealth, as well as the regulators being safe work as well, and also looking at the legislation as well. We have just kind of fielded a question, and I thank them for this, is around updating the COVIDSafe Plan and also just asking, how do I give access to others to use the dashboard? I will be coming to that very important question today and showing you directly how to do that on your own COVIDSafe dashboard that all agencies that are joining us have access to. So I will show you how to actually do that as part of it. Now, one of the key things that we have done over the past 2 weeks now is that there has been a lot of legal changes coming out of the Commonwealth, especially around things like governance notifications and legislation changes to running your AGMs, also around emergency management legislation, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland, where new legislation has come up. So what we have done for across the board for all agencies is just update the COVIDSafe Plan for you as well too. This will be made available in the next couple of days to all agencies joining us today, and you do have your own login details as well too, which will be updated to give you the latest legal compliance information, which will include the new legislation as well, coming out of the Commonwealth and state government, particularly around the Emergency Management Acts as well. So you will have access to those and those reference documents. So the COVIDSafe Plan dashboard that we have, you do have your own login details. We have updated or updating the COVIDSafe Plan for agencies so that you will get the latest information and you can start to utilize that. For agencies just joining us for the first time, this includes the step 1, step 2, step 3, which I will show you briefly, and it includes the specific activities that you need to see in this as well. And with that, your information is being updated around that with the latest information based on new legal changes that have come up. And that is something that is being updated at the moment and will be made available in the next couple of days to all groups as well. And this includes your COVIDSafe plan, so things like what has come out of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and also where you are based on your individual industry plans as well. So it includes the legislation, some new policies that have come out, specifically picking up Commonwealth, as well as Work Health and Safety and Fair Work and Privacy Commissioners information to that. So now that the dashboard and the plan is there, one of the things to look at is, as I've mentioned, some of the forms. So what agencies have done incredibly well is actually utilize some key forms that support the activities coming out of the COVIDSafe Plan itself. And you will see these on your dashboard of what you can get access to. Now, as I've mentioned, one of the key examples that we'll use is Rumbalara Aboriginal Cooperative. And as I've mentioned, I thank Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer there. We will use a number of other case studies over the course of next week as well, specifically around when we come to the reporting and surveillance. So when we look at it, we've got the disaster COVID plan in the middle of your dashboard. But around that, we've got a number of key forms. So the first one that I'll come to is around the COVID assessment form for staff to actually use. And then I'll show you how you can add staff and volunteers into it. And you can do this all from your end itself as well. And then we'll look at some of the other supporting areas like the training, some of the policies and the likes as well. And the idea of this is that with it, you can look at running these for staff to ensure that you can see the information as part of the notifications that you can run. So let's just jump in and have a look at this itself. So first of all, to get there, you would have got a link to log in, and you can use the link that we will have sent you around this. I will just use our demo link, but you can simply go to gemba360.com, and each of you have a dashboard link to this dashboard. If you don't, please email us and we'll make sure that you do. We've onboarded some 2,000 odd agencies in the last few weeks, and that number is growing as part of that. And with it, once you do log in, this is just our test site here. So your COVID dashboard and plan, and again, we're updating this for all agencies around this. So your COVID dashboard that you'll see is, you can view this by clicking on this disaster side, and this brings up this information here. This was covered off in the past session, But effectively, when you go into projects, and again, I'm just stressing that we are updating the legal compliance areas because there have been a lot of new legislation that has come out just in the past couple of weeks. And with it, we wanted to make sure that you have all of the resources available to you. So you can see that you've got your COVID plan, step 1, step 2, step 3. And when you go into it, you will see the breakdown of activities, and you'll also have a series of reference documents. And it is these reference documents that we are updating with the latest legal compliance items. Each of the plan items can then be accessed, and you can then start to utilize this across your agency. Now, let's have a look at some of the forms, and then I'll show you how to update the user information. So on the left-hand side, just running down the left-hand toolbar here that I'm just highlighting, you have your COVID-19 forms. Now, what agencies that have worked really well around this, like Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative, just to name one, has used what we call the daily assessment form. The daily assessment form has been used by staff so that way when they go in, they've clicked on adding a new entry. And what we see here is a series of questions. These questions have been taken directly from the Commonwealth guidelines and relevant state guidelines, and it's a checklist. It's a checklist that we're asking staff to complete to say things like, have you had a fever of above, in this case, 37.5? Do you have shortness of breath? So all the, what I'll call is the clinical criteria. Do you have experienced increased tiredness? Do you have any body aches? There are a series of questions that they can effectively ask. Now, I'm just going to put in test run for webinar around this. So, but if I was to complete this, I'd say if there was any answer to yes, I'd say no. And in this case, I'm just putting in my line supervisor's name and of what's here. I'm going to say this is just a test. And I've got the time that I've just completed this in. And now, because of where we're based on the East Coast, I'm just going to put in 10:25 as part of this. So with it, what this does is effectively, once I complete this, it marks off the date and the time that we've actually done this. It gives me the register of when it's been done, and it actually shows me the date and the time that I've actually completed this. Now, most of the, I can just go in as a manager, and this is because I've got permissions to do this, is marked that it's been completed as part of this. What it gives me across all of my agency, I can actually go in and see all the staff that I manage. I can then see all the forms for all across my own agency, and you can do this exactly today as well too. And importantly, I can see, well, who's got symptoms and who hasn't. But it gives me a single point of monitoring for all of the COVID-19 assessments, and this includes for all staff. So every time a staff member, and I'm just logged in as Fred at the moment, so that's why it all appears as Fred. But if I had a whole number of other people, then I can basically see all the other staff's ones as well. And that's important for effectively ensuring that our staff are safe around this. Now, one of the questions that people have is, well, do we have to do this daily, or is this something that could be done weekly, or when people actually come in? And that's a really good question. Now, what we have seen for other agencies, and another agency as an example of that is Women's Housing Limited. Women's Housing Limited provides housing, refuge, and transitional housing to support women's services and their families. Now, what they do is they do this form weekly. And the reason that they do this weekly is because at the moment they're based in Victoria. Everyone's in locked stage 4 lockdown at the moment, with the exception of regional areas, some regional areas. But with it, staff are not going out and seeing clients. So what they've said is, look, we'll actually get staff to do this weekly from home. It gives us the ability to see, well, is there anybody at risk around this? And when they go back to look at their COVIDSafe plan, and if you remember, I said that this is in the disaster system, you can see that this form that I'm just clicking on here starts to show that, well, we've got our COVIDSafe plan. We know that we need to monitor staff and ensure staff are kept safe. But how do we actually do that? How does our company and your company do it? What's the process that we need to follow? Now, when you log in and see this, you can actually see this right now today. You've got your specific monitoring form that allows you to do this. Now, I'm going to say one of the unintended kind of consequences that occurred with this was that by staff going in, whether that be weekly or whether that be daily, and the reason that, as I said, Women's Housing chose it weekly was because of they had limited client contact and their services are run virtually, versus Rumbalara, where Rumbalara was a service or is a service that they provide medical services, justice programs, a whole range of other services, aged care, which is some of the high-risk areas. And staff needed to do this daily because of the clientele and the services that they're actually running. But either way, when you look at these two case studies, very clearly what they're able to do is monitor from a CEO level and from an executive manager level. You have an agency like Rumbalara that has 230 plus staff, and compared to Women's Housing that has a group of about 50. Now, you look at those two size agencies, but they're on top of where their staff are at in terms of their health and well-being. But it actually gives, the unintended consequence is that it actually gives staff the responsibility of saying, hang on, I'm actually going to participate in what my agency is actually doing. I'm going to be conscious of when I answer these questions, and let me go into this, answering these questions of, well, do I have any of these clinical criteria? Have I been in contact with specific people that may have had this? So these are the sorts of questions that people are actually asking, and staff or volunteers are actually following this through. So you can see as they're going through, this is the importance part of this. Now, the other form that we're actually using is the working from home. Now, the working from home form, again, works in exactly the same way. You can see I've got my forms, which is the forms that I've lodged, forms for use that I manage, and also all forms. So as part of that, again, what we can see from here, and it works in exactly the same way, when staff are going in, this is the working from home approval form. And this was something that we've picked up from Safe Work. So unashamedly, when we've looked at, and let me just jump into the disaster module side, and how I got to there was quite simply going into the disaster dashboard. And you can see how we can navigate throughout all this. I go into my open plan, and this is something that you will have access to around this. And when I look at the Safe Work plan, what we have is effectively the checklist of what can I do to keep my workers safe. Now, this form is great. It's come out of Safe Work. But how do we actually manage this? It's a paper-based form. Do I get staff to complete it? Where do we load it? All this sort of thing. So what we have done is basically taken a carbon copy of this form and added other information and created this working from home approval form. And it's got key criteria for you to use. So things like how long are people going to be working from home? What are the task lists that they're going to be doing? So you can start to monitor and see what these actually look like. And also it's got your approval as part of this, and also information that you want people to actually complete. Now, once they save this form, again, once they save this form and it's just come up, I need to complete it, that effectively creates the register for me. And it's great because it works in exactly the same way my COVID form works. So what this gives me is the ability to manage and support staff remotely. Now, as part of your COVIDSafe plan, it says you must have staff work from home where appropriate and where possible. But again, how do you actually do that? What's the form? If people are working from home, then how can they do that? This form allows you to do that and links back directly to your COVIDSafe plan. So you've got the capacity to actually use this, and you can start using this and you can see it on your dashboard around it. Now, one of the questions, and I do thank, let me just bring this up, who asked this. It was Jean Mark, who asked the question around, and also Michelle, who also asked the question in the chat group around loading users in. So how you can actually do that, and this is all from your front end around this. The important part is to engage staff around your COVIDSafe and to ensure that people, it's not something that is becoming an arduous task and something that is so long. So how do you get access? Now, quite simply, you can go to your own menus. You can go into the user management side. If I click on user management, and you'll see you can basically add a new user, click on this button, or if you want to, you can actually batch a whole lot of users up and load them in. We've got a download template that you can use. If you click on that, it comes up in an Excel document around this, and I'll just open this up for you as well too, so that you can see this. Here it is here. I'll just slide this into the screen. It'll ask you to put in the username, the password, first name, last name, email address, which you guys can do that. Once you do that, you can basically upload the file, and it'll automatically send out emails to everyone to access your dashboard. And it's as simple as that. Once you do that, they'll be able to access this dashboard. You can view it from here, you can see it from here, and they can also then start to participate in completing your daily assessment forms as well. Now, going back to Rumballara and what they've actually done from a case study in supporting their forms is when we've looked at this, and I'll just bring this up. So what we've had a look at is some of the pandemic forms. We've looked at the reporting forms for the COVIDSafe plans. We've looked at either the daily assessments or weekly assessments based on which location you're in. We've seen it in places like Queensland, where people are actually utilising this on a weekly basis. We've seen it in agencies like Victoria, where they're doing it on a daily basis because of the services that they're running. Now, the other part that we've also need to look at is staff training as part of this process. Thank you, Jean Mark, for your comments. Yeah, the bulk update is there. It makes it just so much easier to upload staff in rather than doing it one by one. Idea is that, look, for agencies even like Rumballara, they have 230 plus staff over the past 3 months. They've had, feels a lot longer than that, I think 4 months now. They've had to onboard staff, finish staff up. So you can manage all of that directly out of the user management profile, and the bulk upload gives you that ability to move this very, very quickly. And let's be quite clear, we're trying to shortcut the work that you need to do for your COVIDSafe plans to get this up and running as soon as possible. Now, one of the other things that came out of the Commonwealth directive around it was ensuring that staff are adequately trained as well. Now, you can, and agencies have used our Gemba 360 YouTube videos, which is great. One of the things that you do have access to is what we call the Gemba College, and this is something that is active now for you. So with it, when you click on this, what this gives you is a list of all of the webinars and course materials as well too, and resources. So you can see that here. This is a full e-learning system around this, and it's there for yourselves to actually utilize as well. So all of the webinars, all of the information, it's part of a Commonwealth directive, is to make sure that staff are actually trained around COVIDSafe, what they need to be aware of, and all of the webinars that we have are loaded in this space for you. You can also use this for your own training as well too, if you like, but this gives you a complete training module. It is a Moodle platform that we've bolted on. Moodle, if you are all aware, if most of you are aware, is used by most of the universities and TAFE sectors all across the country, and effectively it is there for yourselves to use. So with it, what you've got on this is your COVIDSafe plan in the middle. You've got your COVID assessment forms to manage staff and help staff monitor and make sure that their health and well-being is safe. If they answer yes around this, then you can follow that through. Equally, you've got your work health assessment forms for working from home. What a couple of other things that we've placed on here is workstation assessment form. Now you can see this going down the left-hand side. Now the workstation assessment form, what's this used for? Well, if staff are working from home, and the Commonwealth and state governments have all said staff should work from home where possible. Right. Now, one of the issues that then comes out of that is to say, well, if they're going to work from home, is their workstation safe? Does it meet the minimum kind of work health and safety spaces for people to work from? Well, what this checklist does is give you that certainty around it. It asks you things about the office chair or keyboard and mouse. If is the work surfaces directly in front of you? Are they taking adequate breaks? Do they know aware of what accessories they should be using as part of this? It sounds all very silly in some ways that you need to kind of go through this. But again, if staff are working from home, what's your process to ensure that the workstation is appropriate for them? Where do you actually document this information down? So this is the sort of things that when we talk of the forms for COVID safe, one of the things that we are seeing is a COVID safe plan, and you'll hear me say this probably over and over again in today's session. The COVID safe plan is just one part. You can have the full COVID safe plan, and with all the listed activities, these forms will give you the activities that staff need to do in order to ensure that your COVID safe plan is working. It is, and you'll be able to report that, yes, we've met our work health and safety obligations. Yes, we've met our work safe requirements as well. Now, one of the things that comes up, and let me just point this to you as well too, is this function as well. One of the agencies, and I can just see somebody's just posted a question, is how can we post information to staff about a new policy or a new request that we have that we need them to complete? Now, one of the functions that you have on your Gemba COVIDSafe dashboard is this. It is the notice board, and you can see there's a notice board on the right-hand side. Now, with it, let me say this. If I wanted to post a notice to somebody, right, I can go into here. I can select the people that I want to send this to. Now, let me say I want to send this, and I say, right, I'm going to send this to, and I'm just going to copy myself into this as well too, just to show you what this looks like. And I'm going to say, I have a new COVID-19 policy that I want people to view. Now, with this, I'm going to say, hey, everyone, please read this policy that is important for our agency, right? And with it from here, I'm just going to complete the notice board item. What I am going to do is just load in, and you can see down the bottom, I can choose a file to load in, and I'm just going to select a document to actually load up for us. And I'm going to show you what one looks like. Now, with it, here it is here. I'm just going to select a document like I do, and I can actually post that notice. Now, once I post that notice, what happens is this. I can effectively go in and actually have a look at the notice itself. Now, one of the questions that people often turn around and say to us is, oh, look, once I send it, what's the difference between using this and sending out an email? Now, importantly about the COVIDSafe plans that we need to see is that what we need to actually look at is to ensure that staff are actually reading these notices that we post out. It is something that we need to make sure that staff are actually reading these notices themselves. And you don't want just an email to go out where people are saying, oh, look, I am just going to get the email around this, and I want to make sure that we're actually seeing this come through as well. So how do I actually show this of what has actually gone on? where do I actually see the notifications of what we have, and where can I actually see this itself? So let's have a look at this. Now, I've just posted this notice to Fred. Now, what happens is this. Let me show you this. So Fred automatically gets this notification coming up to his email box. Okay. So Fred will see this notification coming up. Here it is, which we will just show you in a second. Here it is here. I've just posted this out. It says, hey, this is the new COVID-19 policy, and it's gone out. And Fred can basically click this out and see what's being read. Now, once he does that, and I'll just close that down, I'll leave that altogether. Now, here's the really cool thing about this. So you want to make sure that people have read it. Once we go in, I can load and look at this, and I can click on confirm that I've read it. What happens is that automatically, once I've confirmed that I've read it, it automatically says, right, here's the date and the time, and it was read by this person on this date. What this gives you is then the insight, and this is something that Rumballara has been using as well too, and other agencies. It is something that Rumballara has been using to go, right, I know that this person has read this on this date. Now, when it goes back to the notice board, it disappears off the notice board because I've already read it. But the important part is that if you ever wanted to go in and see it there, it disappears there. Who's read what items? Then what you're able to do is go back into the notice register, which is the blue button on the left-hand side. I can then click on the top item, and I'm just going to post this back here, and I can see who's read it and who hasn't. Now, the good thing about this for all of you is that, especially during COVID-19, when you want to make sure that your staff are reading policies or reading something that is so important to their health and well-being, that is so important to your clients' health and well-being, then you can actually use this to post a notice. I just did it then. It will then, you can post out policy documents that you might have. You might post out media releases that you want people to read. And when they read it, it will automatically confirm that they've read it. And you've then got that audit trail. And this is important. You've got the audit trail to say that that person has read it on what date and at what time. Now, just picking up Jean's comment, Jean Mark's comment below, once you upload all the staff into it, it means that you don't have to rely on emails. You don't have to rely on saying, oh, I never got to it, I was so busy, whatever has gone on. Because what happens is the system will dob on them. If they don't read it, then effectively it'll turn around and tell you this person hasn't read it within the last couple of weeks, and it's something that they need to do. So you've got effectively this COVID-safe dashboard system that will dob on people by email reporting to you. It'll tell you, right, you've got your COVID-safe plan right in the middle here, which gives you your COVID-safe reporting, and you can see that here under the projects. It runs your activities of what you can see. You've got your forms running down the left-hand side, which includes, and I've covered off some of those, the key COVID daily assessment forms. You've got your working from home registers, which you have, which is required by the Commonwealth, and any state government have said this. You've got your workstation assessment form for your work health and safety requirements that you can then utilize as well too. With it, you've then got also your safe work assessment forms for things like what can I do to make sure my workers are safe. And this is the last form down the bottom, and here it is here. And it's got that information there for when you return to work. Now, some of the agencies have asked us for work registers as well too for when people are showing up to work, and those are located in your COVIDSafe plan, so you can use those as well. So what you've got on this dashboard is your plan in the middle, plus all of your other forms to use as well. You've got your e-learning, which is in the Jemba College area, which you can access. You can click on that today and you can view those. You've also got the last form that I'll show you is your HR space. Now, your HR space What this gives you is this. One of the things, if people are working remotely, they need to be able to update their information. So whether your agency has your volunteers or your staff as well too, or even your members, for example, board members as well too, if they're working as remotely as possible, then they need to be able to update their own info. And picking up Jean, Mark's, and Michelle's request, and also seeing Sonia's comment as well too, I can see as well too, around loading in users from today. Again, once you automatically load your users in, and how you do that, as I mentioned, is I'll just jump back to the dashboard and going to the user management and clicking on uploading the batch users. That will give you the ability to upload users as part of that. They will automatically get access to all of these resources. And one of those resources is this HR space. This HR space allows them to actually update their information. This is something that agencies like Rumballara, from a case study, has been using to, and it works. And I stress that it works. So with it, once we see this from a legal compliance point of view, you need to be able to manage staff, volunteers, and member information. So things like updating emergency contact information, looking at how they do that. They can log in. They can simply click on adding emergency contacts, and you can see I've done that. And they can simply update that information there. Equally, you can see I've put in my mobile number here because everybody, even Google, has my mobile number as well too, after attending parliamentary inquiries on behalf of agencies as well. And if they wanted to, they can also update their contact information. Now, the power around this for your agencies is the ability to be able to then basically go in, and I can actually have a look at each of the contacts that these people have. And there's some dummy contacts that we've created around this. What it gives you is the ability to run your employees registers, your member registers, your volunteer registers, and your board members all off this single system for you. And it gives you the directives to be able to make sure that your employees are safe, your members are safe, your volunteers are safe, and your board members are safe as well. And you can run these registers directly. So with that, you've got the ability on this from a COVIDSafe dashboard to be able to run this. Now, the very last thing I will show you is the policy sides. Now, within this, you can run your policies on this and load in your policy documents. For your agency, we have loaded in a series of COVID-safe policies, and you can simply find those by typing in policy in this search bar in the top right-hand corner. As I said, type in policy in your Gemba space, and you will find a list of policies that are available for you that already meet your legal compliance obligations as well. And these are resources that are available for you. So going back around it, what you can see from your COVIDSafe dashboard, you've got your COVIDSafe plan, which we covered off last week. We've got your activities, we've got your forms, we've got your registers that you need. What this will give you is the ability to put your plan into action and meet your legal compliance obligations in one spot. And it becomes something very easy for you to manage. What we will be looking at next week is effectively the business process side, the legal compliance obligations to reporting, monitoring, and also surveillance as well. And within that, each one of those, you can then be linked back to your reporting, monitoring, and surveillance. We have just got an inquiry from asking, can forms be incorporated into an existing HR system? Yes, they can. So with the forms, what you can do, and let me just bring that up as well too, within this, what you can actually do is, let me show you this, is that if I go into certain areas, you have the ability to actually add in, for example, under membership areas, for example, or even let me bring in qualifications. And under this is where you can manage things like your driver's license, police checks, blue card checks, working with children checks, depending on what state you're in as well. So you can actually add in specific requirements around this. And we've got a list of those ones there. Because you also have admin control as well too around this, what you can also do is actually add in, let's say under driver's license, I wanted to add in a specific license that they have. So for example, I can simply go in and you can change and add this information in directly in here. So if I wanted to go into, for example, memberships, and let me bring that up around that. Let me have a look. Actually, we'll do it in skills, for example. So if I wanted to go into skills, I can actually load that in and actually add a specific skill that I wanted people to actually report against. So with it, there are some agencies that have now said, right, we want to actually monitor COVID-19 reporting. So if I wanted to do this, let me just add in and I can say, right, I wanted a skill being COVID-19 training. And I could select that and simply save that. So I've just done that purely live here. What happens when I go back into the dashboard, and I'll just go back into here, and I'm going into, for example, qualifications. And now when I go to skills and I go to the drop-down menu, here it is here. And it'll just come up with you in a second. So within that, you can actually add in specific training that you want within your agency. I can see that this has just generated a whole lot of questions out of that. And as part of that, Michelle has just asked us a question, just saying, does this system let you capture training that people have done, and can you get reports that flag when they need to repeat it? Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. So again, if I wanted to add that in, and let's say we do it again, so let me just do that again for you as well too. So if I go to, let's say, education, for example, I might put that in there, and I say, right, I want people to do a training of CPR as well too, which is generally mandatory across Australia, and I'm just going to select add. So I've done that under education. Now when I go into my info, and I can go into, for example, qualifications, and in this case, I'm just going to go into education, and I can go to the drop-down menu, and now CPR literally appears because I've just added it a few seconds ago, but you can add whatever you like to your own. I can say I've done this at, let's say, Australia Institute. All right, I'll just make something up. All right. Major specialization is CPR, yearly training, year is 2020, score I got was 10 around that. Now, start date, I'm going to say, right, I've just done it today, and it's going to be done valid until next year. Now, once I've saved that around it, here it is, I saved that. Okay, I'm doing this all live for you as well too. Firstly, what happens here is that once I've registered it here, what it'll do is a week before it's due next year, it'll actually fire off an email to you, Michelle, saying, hey, this person needs to actually redo their CPR training and it needs to be done. If I wanted to answer your second question around the reporting, you can actually try this out yourselves even today. If I wanted to, I simply go to the Personnel Information Management tab here. We will be looking at this next week. And quite simply, I go to Reports. And here it is here. I've got a series of reports. The first one I'm just going to do is the sample report, which appears across yours. And I can simply click on Run. And what this does is instantly, to make sure I meet my legal compliance space, automatically runs a report across my entire HR system. And I can see, right, let's have a look for the CPR training that I've just put in. Here's my details. And here is the CPR training that I've just entered in literally a few seconds ago. Now, if you had a whole bunch of staff working remotely, and exactly this is what Rumbalara Aboriginal Corporation, they've got, as I mentioned, some 230 plus staff. Their own staff have entered in their most recent information, and HR can literally at any stage run a report across their entire agency around key items. And if I wanted to, you can see there's an export function here. I can simply click on that and it brings it out down the bottom into an Excel file. If you wanted to, I can see there's some questions just ran to say running out of existing reports. If you wanted to, you can see I've customized a few reports here. You can actually create your own reports. Simply go to add. I can call it Michelle, if you don't mind. I'm just going to use your first name. I'm going to call it Michelle's report. And I can then run specific reports and create a specific report and save that based on what I want to actually see. And that allows me to create custom reports across the whole system. With it, there's just a couple of other questions as a group that I'll mention. A few people have just asked, will this interface with other existing HRIS systems? It can as well too. We've done work with agencies around this. We can set up what we call API links between not just this HR module, but the whole of the Gemba system around it. So things like if you're running things like SharePoint, other Microsoft systems as well too, whether that be document systems or even other payroll or other systems as well too. There can be APIs that link in and drag information one way or two ways. So that way it'll actually update information. So even down to email accounts, there are some agencies that have 400, 500 plus staff. And once you get up to those levels, it can automated processes can also be linked into other systems. But what this gives you is a single source of truth to manage your information in. Keeping in mind, it will send out alerts. So important things like APRA registration checks, mandatory training and registers that you need to complete, notifications, which I've just shown you around CPR training as well. All of these areas that you can see here, and this is just the HR side, it will send out those notifications automatically for you. And especially during COVID-19, where we're finding that so many agencies are working from home. They're trying to keep up to date with all of their compliance activities and legal obligations. And especially with your COVIDSafe plan, you need to make sure that some of your compliance audits are kept up to date as well. And this effectively does that, as I've shown you, for that already. And that's what gives you, I'm going to say, the single source of truth around this from a legal compliance point of view. So with it, as I've mentioned, we will be covering, and I'm just conscious of time, we will be covering off next week the reporting, monitoring, and surveillance of your COVIDSafe plan, plus this compliance side of this legal compliance side of the system as well. Recommendations that we are making is following from last week around your COVIDSafe plan. We are updating the legal compliance entries, and your agencies, each of your agencies will get the latest updates around that. That will give you your plan, your policy, your pandemic forms. If you've already got your login details, have a look at the forms that we've gone through today. You can have a look at the HR system and the e-learning system. Those are all live for you. If you don't have your login details for that, by all means, drop me an email around this with the details, or give me a call as well. With it, your dashboard, you can commence working on that throughout your agency. As I mentioned, there is some licensing costs if you do have other staff, which we've covered off in past webinars, and we will be sending out to agencies around that. You do have access for a seat to open this up for your agency, and you can see that as well too. We have just got a question which I will mention. Will we get a new invite for the next week's webinar? No, you shouldn't, Michelle. It is part of a series. So if you've enrolled into this webinar, you will automatically get a a reminder a day beforehand, but it will be run on the same time next week as well too, and also recorded. Before we open up the phone lines to any questions and chat lines to any questions with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do have any questions or you are listening to this or watching this recording at a later stage, by all means, please contact us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at our general email and call line, which is support@gemba360.com.